Oh, hello there, you magnificent entrepreneur. It's Tash here, and I have a question for you. Have you ever felt like you're just not cut out for being an online business owner? Or it feels like everything is harder for you and everyone else just seems to have it all figured out and they know what to do, or they're able to do it more effectively, and maybe you just need an entire personality transplant? Have you ever felt like you need to change who you are fundamentally or completely change the way that you work in order to be successful? If so, I very much encourage you to listen to this episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast, because I am here to help. It's day 2 of Tashmas, happy Tashmas, and this is episode number 382. So that means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/382. In today's episode, I am going to help you to create a business that works for you. And it might sound really simple and straightforward when you think about it that way, but honestly, we have a lot to contend with, especially for those people who are marginalized. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stay tuned. Let's dive in. I'm Tash Corbin, and this is the Heart Centered Business Podcast. Now, I know that I did this yesterday, and I'm going to do it again today. I am going to start this podcast episode by asking you if you've heard another saying, which is, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will spend its life feeling like a failure. Have you heard that one before? I love it so much, and I really feel it. Like, I feel that one in my bones. And the thing is that I see a lot of people online, and I hear this belief over and over again, that people just don't think that they are cut out for business, or they're not something enough. They're not disciplined enough. They're not organized enough. They're not outgoing enough. They're not whatever enough in order to be successful. And the word discipline has actually come up like 4 or 5 times in the last week. And it seems so timely for us to therefore have this conversation. I've recently been doing market research interviews, and we're back into the swing of group calls for my programs this year. And I'm just seeing this come up more and more. And so I wanted us to have a conversation about it, because I can see exactly what's going on, and it's not you. What frustrates me the most about hearing people say this is that I hear it from the very people who I most want to see succeed. The very people that I want to buy from, I want to promote, I want to refer my friends to, are the ones who feel like they are imposters in the online business world, or they're failures, or they are the ones who are most likely to struggle to get results working with a mentor or doing a program, and therefore they make it mean that they just need to give up. It's frustrating because the problem is not you. When we think about it, the whole concept of business and entrepreneurship started in a time where a lot of the things we needed to be entrepreneurs were not available to marginalized people. Women couldn't even have their own bank accounts without their husband signing off on it, or their father, until the 20th century. That wasn't that long ago. And it is so interesting to me that we don't unpack and dissect the establishment of business work habits, structures, and routines far more now that we have far more workplace participation from women. And not only women, but people who have experienced other marginalization as well. So if business was established when it was mostly or exclusively straight white men who were running businesses, or even allowed to own businesses, then it makes sense that the traits that were seen to indicate someone was disciplined and bound for success were based on straight white men. A simple but powerful example of this is the difference between male and female hormone cycles. So the androgen hormone cycle, which is dominant in males, is a 24-hour cycle. So it makes sense if you have that hormone cycle to have a similar day every single day, to have consistency in your days. If you have a menstrual cycle, that doesn't apply to you because the menstrual hormone cycle is that monthly cycle. So if you think about some of the advice that you have even been given in having an online business or when you worked in corporate, you may have heard this whole thing about having a regular wake up time and having a regular morning routine. You get up at the same time, you do the same thing at the start of every day. I've even heard like you need to get up and exercise straight away, and that is the best for everyone. The truth of the matter is that's actually not true. And as soon as I heard about this, I had the hugest light bulb moment because I had spent so much of my corporate career and so much of my time as a business owner trying to have a consistent wake up time every single day. And it was really challenging for me to do that, especially as a business owner, because I didn't have a boss seeing what time I arrived at work each day. I was the boss. And so you would think that we would have by now understood the difference between these cycles and therefore stopped labeling people who wake up at the same time each day as being more disciplined and understood that the fact that it's more difficult or challenging for women to get up at the same time each day because of their hormone cycle, therefore means that that's not a discipline or a virtue. That is actually just your body's natural rhythm. So men are rewarded for operating on the androgen hormone cycle when that's just what their body does. And women are seen as being less disciplined or less virtuous or less ambitious simply because our bodies aren't built that way. I beg your pardon? That is exactly the example of judging a fish by its ability to climb a tree. And yet, we still see to this day different disciplines and different habit-forming routines as being pitched as being the right way to run a business or the thing that you need to do to be successful. And this is what I'm seeing over and over again in my market research interviews and in my group calls at the moment is people labeling themselves as somehow not disciplined enough or starting to question whether they're even cut out to have an online business because they were able to mask previously in their corporate roles, but now as an online business owner, if they really truly listen to their body, they don't like or thrive when they get up early in the mornings, right? Like this is the thing that 4 hours of sleep is being worn as a badge of honor, or getting up at 5 a.m. is being seen as this discipline, when in reality, it's coming from a space of privilege, but it's also quite delusional. And in not understanding that there are differences that are impacting on different people's ability or capacity to behave in certain ways or adopt certain routines, we're also starting to see the gap between marginalized people and people with a lot of privilege widen. Because if someone joins a course and they have every intention of being a disciplined student and showing up to all of the calls, but then they get distracted or life gets busy or they forget to watch the homework, therefore they're not allowed to come to the live call or whatever might happen, then they are being told that, well, that's on them, right? You bought the program and you didn't engage with it, or you bought the program and you didn't come to the call, or you didn't do the homework, and therefore you're not disciplined enough, you are not virtuous enough, you are not cut out for online business, you're not ambitious enough, when in reality, the people who are most likely to experience disruption to their learning are marginalized people. When you really unpack what is causing that disruption or is causing people to not be able to implement as quickly as others, it's often an issue of this marginalization. So it might be the single mums. It might be the women who cannot get up at 5 a.m. every single day, or they have endometriosis, or there are other things that are going on for them. They're carrying the mental and emotional load for their household and expected to do all of the household labor in an unacknowledged and unpaid way. And then they're building their business at the same time. And the trainer can't understand why they couldn't find 5 hours in their day. They were home all day. That unacknowledged privilege and that unacknowledged marginalization causes marginalized people to believe that the problem is them, that the problem is a lack of discipline. I mean, that's not even tapping into the other issues, such as being able to take risks or having access to a financial safety net because you don't have access to intergenerational wealth, right? So this particularly impacts Black, Indigenous, and people of color because they don't necessarily have the same access to foundations or backups that people who benefited from colonization do have. And again, we are seeing this touted as some sort of discipline. Well, just because I saved and bought myself a house doesn't mean that like I should feel guilty for that when you didn't do it. But the capacity to save for a house, the capacity to earn the money needed to be able to have savings in excess, all of those things are impacted by privilege and marginalization. And whilst on a case-by-case individual basis, you may be able to pick holes in individual circumstances, that is the whole point, right? Is that the people who are marginalized, who have access to privilege as well, are the exception, not the rule. And everything is being built through the lens of that very privilege. So what does this mean for us as business owners? Well, first and foremost, I want to say that I'm not going to dive deep into the cause of the problem. And there are lots and lots of people who are brilliant at helping you to unpack your own experience of privilege and marginalization and understand inclusion through the lens of business. And I will put some links in the show notes to a couple of people that I recommend. It's also in my signature block if you ever get an email from me. And I just want to focus our time in this podcast episode on what to do about it and look at the solution instead. But I have only skimmed the surface here. So if this is something that you do want to understand more fully and you want to do a deep dive into how this shows up in the online business space, number one, I'm happy to have a conversation about that at any time because it is something I get very ranty about. You might hear that in my tone of voice and the speed with which I'm talking. But also, please do go and make it part of your plans for today to go and follow people who speak about this more consistently because we have so much to learn. And I am absolutely not at all professing to be an expert in this space. What I speak about are things that I have learned in my own experiences and through my own education in this space. And I definitely acknowledge I still have a whole lot more to learn. But this is where I want to focus us today is on, well, what do we do about it? Because if I'm seeing an alarmingly growing trend of marginalized people online being further marginalized and being told that it's a matter of discipline, personality, or their ambition that is stopping them from being successful, then this is something that I want us to address and really pay attention to. And I think we also need to pay attention to what we hear from our peers and our clients as well. So I want to put us all together in this powerful community who is cutting off this belief system and this trend by acknowledging it and speaking about it with those people around us. And especially if you hear someone say, oh, I just think I'm not disciplined like I was in corporate, I want you to pull them up on it. Now, one of the things I will speak to around the difference between being a business owner and being in a job is that a lot of people, when they become entrepreneurs and they start their own business, they start to notice that they don't behave in the same way when it's them that's in charge. Part of that can come from this sense of, well, no one's waiting for me, so I can kind of dilly-dally a bit more. And also, I know that my success is now completely on my shoulders. And so therefore, the fear of that success or the fear of failure or the mindset blocks about that are interfering with my ability to show up. I totally understand all of that. But also what happens is more and more people recognize that they may be neurodivergent now that they've created their own business and they're not masking and they're not just following the societal norms or the workplace norms around how we behave and how we operate, they recognize actually they've been masking neurodivergency throughout their lives. And this is exactly my experience. So if you looked at me in the schoolroom, if you looked at me in my work in corporate, you would have absolutely thought that I was neurotypical. But I wasn't acting in alignment with my natural tendencies. I was masking those tendencies because if I was to embrace who I really was or behave in a more natural way, that would be punished. When I masked as neurotypical, that was rewarded. Those behaviors were rewarded. So this is the experience of a lot of people. And it's not just about neurotypical versus neurodivergent. It's also about the hormone cycle. It's also a matter of health and well-being, work timeframes, the capacity to sit and focus and concentrate. Now, if you watched me and observed me in a learning mode in university or in my corporate life, you would have seen someone who was very good at sitting and listening and paying attention. You would have seen someone who was a very engaged and active learner. 90% of the time, my brain was off doing something else. I was very good at looking like I was paying a lot of attention. I was very good at picking things up quickly, and then I would spiral off into other thoughts. And that was as a result of like being seen, right? You're visible when you're sitting in a learning environment with other people. And so that is something that I am definitely unpacking myself as I continue on this journey of being a business owner, because I was told my whole life that I was a very lazy person. And for a long time, I tried to deny that I was a lazy person and prove that I wasn't by working harder than everyone else and taking on more responsibility than everyone else. And then I started to recognize that fear that like, actually, I am totally a lazy person. I've been pretending to not be a lazy person my whole life. So even when I was working in corporate and I started to kind of pay attention to these things and think, and start to wonder out loud, like, I wonder if I'm actually just a really lazy person, people would be aghast. I'd be like, no way, you are not a lazy person. And then when I started my business and I started to say, you know what, I think I'm actually quite lazy at heart, and people would defend me to myself, like, no, you're not lazy. Look at you. You work so hard. You do all of these things. And it was seen as this like moral high ground that I worked really hard and that I looked like I was really busy. But actually, I've got to the point now in my business where I recognize that my laziness is actually a benefit to me, not a disbenefit. It is something that ensures that I keep my boundaries tight around the time that I give to my business, and I have a life. It means that I don't waste my time doing things that aren't going to get me results and that, you know, are just keeping the time hours filled. But it also means that it's a benefit to my clients. And I actually say this inside the Heart Centered Business Planning system, where I say that my laziness is their efficiency. If there's a way to do something faster, I found it. If there's a shortcut, I found it. If there's a way to avoid doing something, I've found it. And so it's actually a superpower. It's not a lack of discipline or a terrible trait or something that I need to work on. And in fact, when I recognized that it was my superpower and stopped trying to prove to the world that I wasn't lazy, I created a far more profitable, far more time efficient, far more aligned business. Instead of trying to become more disciplined, trying to work harder, trying to work longer hours, I just started to adapt my business to what I liked and what my strengths were. And in doing so, I created far more success. So if you want to create a business that actually works for you and get out of this cycle of believing you need to have a complete personality transplant or bend yourself into being someone that you're not in order to be successful, how can you do this at a more tangible level? Well, I've got 3 things that I want to talk about in today's Tashmas. Number 1 is when it comes to strategy, if the person you're learning from pitches that what they're doing is the only way to do it, what they're saying is that's the only way they know how to do it. If the strategy that you have focused on doesn't align with your natural strengths, doesn't feel like it's a fit for you, requires you to mask or overload yourself or pretend to be someone that you're not, find another strategy. And I would say get a better coach or mentor. Because ultimately, if your mentor isn't able to adjust the strategy to align with your needs, adjust the strategy to work to your strengths, adjust the strategy to be more flexible and adaptable, then they aren't necessarily able to help you to succeed. They can help people like them succeed. They have a very homogenous client base who their success stories are, but they aren't necessarily able to help someone like you. And that's totally fine. They're not for you. I would also argue that if you look at someone's client base and it seems that there's a lot of privilege in the success stories and you don't have access to that privilege, then expecting to use the same strategies and get the same results when that privilege is missing is a fallacy. It's not going to work for you. So when it comes to the strategy that you're choosing, focus on strategies that actually align with your strengths, with your natural way of working. Focus on strategies that align with how you want to show up, the type of activities you want to do, being in your zone of genius. The second thing is to look at not just the strategy you use, but the way that you work. So when it comes to getting up early to work or working late, what actually feels like it serves you? What actually feels like it's aligned with how you are going to be in your best mode, or creating the environment in which you are most likely to succeed? I need color in order to succeed. I need a messy desk from time to time because of object transference. If I don't see something, it doesn't exist. And so I need to have reminders on my desk. I have Post-its here and there, and that is what works for me. There are times where I don't need that and I can tidy things up, and I do know energetically it's great to have a good clean of the desk and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, if I had someone observe the way that I work in my business through the lens of successful people have a clean desk, they start their day at the same time each day, they sit at their desk for at least 6 hours a day, they eat a nutritious meal at exactly 11:45 each day, I would look like a complete failure. But I'm not measuring my success as a fish by my ability to climb a tree. I no longer measure myself by the way that I mask and look like a successful person. I instead measure my success by the feeling of success that I experience each day and the measures of success that are meaningful to me. And so when it comes to the way that you work, look for ways that you can really align the way that you work to work for you instead of looking like someone else that you want to aspire to be like. And a great question to ask yourself is, does this serve me? So something that I previously used to do was have a lot of tabs open on my computer. And even when I was in corporate at night, we were supposed to all shut our computers down, and I just turned the monitor off on my computer because I had so many tabs open and things that I was still working on. And so when I started my business, that same habit kind of followed me. And I almost wore it as a badge of honor as well. I could juggle a lot of tasks at once. I could carry a lot of things around in my brain. And so it was a bit of a mirror of what was going on in my brain. There were a lot of tabs open. And something that I noticed though was that my computer was having more failures. Whenever I had something that was frustrating me, my computer's not working, something's not working, the first thing, and Davey still does it to this day, is he goes, have you tried shutting down and restarting? And he says it kind of sarcastically, but often that was the answer. Have you tried shutting down and restarting? And when I started to see that my computer would get slower a lot faster, right? It would just fail more, it would get slow, and sometimes it just never would recover, even when I would restart it. I started to ask, is this actually a great way of working? Is this serving me? Now, if I was told I needed to close down my tabs because that's what good people do, I would never have really embraced the closing down all my tabs at the end of the day, right? because that's not enough of a motivator for me. I need to really understand how it serves me. But what I recognized was my brain was a little bit like my laptop. It had a lot of tabs open and I was trying to carry everything in my brain and I was never allowing myself a good shutdown. And so when I switched off for the day, I didn't really switch off. When I went to go to the movies with Davey, I was having reminders that, I must remember that, pop into my head. When I would go and watch TV with Davey or we'd go out for a walk, I was constantly saying, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to do XYZ today. I'll have to remember to do that tomorrow. I wasn't sleeping as well. I would have that sit up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. and have to write something down on a piece of paper because I had just remembered something I'd forgotten. That was not actually serving me. So I decided to embark upon an experiment. And that experiment was closing down my tabs at the end of the day every day. Closing down my computer and actually shutting it down. Not only did that mean my laptop worked far more effectively, but also what I noticed was my brain shut down far more effectively as well and switched off from business. I was more present with my partner and my friends and family when I wasn't working. And I had far less of those moments where I was like, I got to remember that. Instead, I set about creating a way of having a wind down routine at the end of each day, regardless what time I finish. So some days I finish at 2, some days I finish at 11 a.m., some days I finish at 5. Whatever it was, whenever I finished my business, I would shut down my computer and I would also do what I needed to do to be able to switch off my brain. So in my planning system and in the way that I manage my day, at the end of each day, I shut down all the tabs on my computer. If there are any tabs that are still open that I'm like, I need to reopen that tomorrow, then I just put the link into tomorrow's appointment in my calendar. Okay, that's the first thing I'm doing tomorrow. Here's the link. So I don't have to type it in again. I don't have to remember, but I'm not trying to keep the tab open. It's in the calendar. In addition, if there's anything in my brain that I'm trying to remember, I must do that tomorrow, I must remember to do that, I actually write it down in tomorrow in my planner to do. Or if it's just I have to remember it, but it's not for tomorrow, I put it into my project management system. So by taking that little extra step of closing everything down and getting it out of my brain and into my system, I can then be far more present and switch off. So you can see how sometimes a habit or a way of working may have served us at some point, or we might just start to convince ourselves that's just how we operate, but it's no longer serving us. And discerning between those two can be really powerful. So if there's something that you think that you need to do each day, or a way that you naturally work, or a habit that you've got into that you're trying to change, ask yourself first, does this serve me? Does it serve me to learn how to get up at 4:30 a.m. every day? Or is that actually going to be me bending and shaping myself to someone else's perception of what success looks like? And then the final thing is to learn from people who don't have such a homogenized audience and success stories, and also to learn from less homogenized people. So if every single person that you're following has a strong work ethic, whatever that looks like, and every single person that you have hired as a mentor has had long work days or has talked about discipline, potentially it might be time to find someone different. I definitely encourage you to follow more marginalized people and people with different marginalizations to yours as well, because there's a lot that we can learn from people who've experienced bigger and deeper and different marginalizations than us. And it really also helps me to understand how to best serve my clients when I learn from people who are different to me, when I learn from people who have experienced different marginalization than I have. So you might like to follow a bunch of different people. You might like to hire people, not because they earn more money than you, therefore look externally more successful than you, but actually because they have the lifestyle that you want, or they seem to work in a way that seems really aligned with what will work for you. That's a really great reason to work with someone. But also This is part of the reason why at the start of my webinars, I say I want to fill the world's rich list with more marginalized people, because not only do I know that that's going to change the world for good, but I also know that that's actually part of why I say we do online business best, is because every time I have worked with a mentor who has experienced marginalization, they are far more likely to acknowledge the marginalization that I've faced, and therefore helped me to navigate a more flexible or adapted strategy or a more flexible or adapted way of working, because they are not operating from the fixed mindset that the way that they work is the best way and the only way, or the strategy that they use is the best strategy and the only strategy. So it might be something to put on your agenda for 2024 to maybe diversify the people that you learn from and the measures that you use to determine whether someone is successful or not, and in particular, the measures that you use on yourself. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not broken. You do not need an entire personality transplant in order to be successful. The problem is that you've been measuring yourself by standards and measures that were built for someone else. They were not built for you. Doesn't that feel better? I know it definitely feels better for me. Now, because this is Tashmas, we do have a special offer. And the offer that I'm sharing with you today actually relates to this sense of productivity and getting stuff done. So as part of my journey in understanding more about the menstrual hormonal cycle, I have been doing a lot of experimenting over the last few years with batching. And in the last few months, I have facilitated one-day retreats with very small groups of people where we batch up the creation of an entire freebie and all of the copy for all of the assets all in one day. And I am so excited to let you know that I'm bringing these one-day events on the road. So for very small groups of people with very limited spaces, you can come and join me and create not only a new or a recreated and optimized freebie to grow your mailing list and potentially upsell people into further work with you, but we are also going to write the copy for the opt-in page, the thank you page, the email sequence, the promos of the freebie, the promos of the upsell. So in just one day, you will go from no freebie or a freebie that's not working to all of the copy and all of the decisions, plus my little handy checklist that you need to have it all set up and done. Now, once you've got all of that copy and all of those assets created, you can either go and set that up for yourself in terms of the tech side or give it to someone on your team because the checklists are included. Or if you don't have someone on your team, I have a beautiful little posse of tech angels that you can purchase a special add-on package with so that they will do all the setup for you. And it's not very expensive at all. And during Tashmas, they are also available at a discount. So you can save $200 off your spot simply by purchasing during Tashmas. That will also get you bonus entries in the mega draw that we're doing for Tashmas because you've made a purchase. And if it is not a city that you're able to come and work with me at, you can on that page also request another city. So there's a button down the bottom of the sales page where you can click and fill in the form and provide your details and where you'd like me to bring this event. And if we do go ahead with an event in your city, you'll be one of the first to know. So make sure you get your vote in if you want me to come elsewhere, because I am looking at doing at least 2 or 3 more events this year on top of the ones that are already scheduled. If you would like to get your entry in the mega draw for today, I will also be linking with the show notes at tashcorbin.com/382 to a post over on my Facebook page where we can continue the conversation about structuring your strategy and the way that you work in alignment with what works for you, rather than trying to bend and mold yourself into someone else's symbols and structures of success. So come on over to the show notes at tashcorbin.com/382. And if you follow the link to the post on my page and contribute to the conversation there, either by asking questions, sharing any light bulb moments that happened for you, sharing specifics about things that you're going to stop doing or you're going to start doing, or even just asking people who are participating in the conversation questions about what works for them. Then you will get an entry into the mega draw for that participation in the discussion. So in the mega draw, I'll be giving away VIP sessions as well as stationery packs and gift packs and a few other juicy little prizes. And that will all be happening after Tashmas is complete on the 12th of March. If you have any questions, you can ask them over on that post, or feel free to send an email to support@tashcorbin.com or send a DM to me on social media. Thank you so much for joining me for day 2 of Tashmas. I hope that you're finding these super valuable. I'll see you tomorrow for day 3. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. Bye for now. Would you like more tips, tools, and resources to help you grow your heart-centered business? Head to tashcorbin.com today.